At midnight, a soldier walks into a house with one order: remove the most powerful man in Iran. No trial, no negotiation, just get him out. He hands over the document. The Prime Minister reads it, looks up, and smiles, because he already knew. The entire coup had been discovered 72 hours earlier. Within hours, the officer is arrested. The plan collapses. The king flees the country, and the CIA panics. This should have been the end. It wasn't, because what happened next was so chaotic, so improvised, and so unlikely that it changed the trajectory of an entire region. And decades later, we're still dealing with the consequences. This isn't just a failed coup. It's the blueprint. The moment powerful nations realized you don't need tanks or armies to control a country. You just need money, narrative control, and enough chaos to make people turn on each other. To truly understand why this happened, you only need one word: oil. In 1901, a British businessman named William Darcy secures exclusive rights to Iranian oil for 60 years. At the time, it seemed like a gamble. Iran was vast, mostly rural, and the idea of underground riches buried beneath desert rock felt more like fantasy than investment. But Darcy believed. He poured money into expeditions, hired engineers, sent teams into brutal terrain. For years, nothing. Dry wells, failed drills, financial pressure mounting from every side. Then, in 1908, they struck oil, massive reserves, among the largest discovered at that time. Almost overnight, the calculation changed. What had been a speculative bet became the foundation of an empire's energy supply. That discovery turns into a company, the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. Today, you know it as BP for Britain. This is everything. Fuel for warships, energy for factories, power for an empire stretched across continents. For Iran, very little changes. Iranian workers labor in extreme heat, long hours, low pay, minimal safety. Men collapse on the job. Entire communities grow around oil facilities, but remain deeply poor. Meanwhile, British staff live completely different lives. Clean housing, air conditioning, social clubs with swimming pools. Even their food is imported from England. Separate cinemas, separate hospitals, separate everything. At one point, Britain earns more from Iranian oil than Iran itself. The country sitting on the resource receives less than the country shipping it away. By the late 1940s, tension is everywhere. Students organize protests, oil workers launch strikes, intellectuals demand sovereignty. The question becomes impossible to ignore. Why doesn't Iran control its own resources? Into this moment steps a man, Mohammad Mosaddegh. He's not a general, not a revolutionary. He's a politician, educated in Switzerland and France, trained in law, deeply nationalistic, known for being emotional, even theatrical. He would weep during speeches, faint in parliament from intensity. Critics called him unstable. Supporters called him passionate. But above all, he was incredibly popular because he said what everyone was thinking. Iran's oil belongs to Iran. He built an entire political movement around it, formed the National Front, and the people rallied behind him. In 1951, Iran's parliament votes unanimously, nationalize the oil industry. Every single member, not a close call, a mandate, overnight. Britain loses control of its most valuable foreign asset. The Abadan refinery, the largest in the world, now belongs to Iran. For Iran, it's independence. For Britain, it's unacceptable. Because if Iran succeeds, every other oil-producing nation might follow. The entire system of foreign resource extraction could unravel. Britain responds aggressively. They impose a global embargo on Iranian oil. They freeze assets. They pull every technician out, betting Iran can't operate the refineries alone. They take the case to international courts. They lobby every ally. But Mosaddegh fights back. He takes his case to the United Nations. He argues eloquently. He reframes the issue not as theft, but as justice. Britain realizes diplomacy isn't enough. They want Mossadegh removed. But the world has changed. After World War II, colonial invasions don't look good anymore. International opinion matters. So instead, they call the United States. At first, the US refuses. President Truman says no. He believes in national sovereignty. He sympathizes with Iran's position. He doesn't want to overthrow a democratically elected leader. But then, everything shifts. New president, Dwight D. Eisenhower, war hero, cold warrior, and beside him, the Dulles brothers. John Foster Dulles, Secretary of State, Allen Dulles, Director of the CIA, both convinced the global battle against communism defines everything. Britain changes its strategy brilliantly. They stop talking about oil. Instead, they start talking about communism. They claim Mossadegh is destabilizing Iran. His nationalization is crippling the economy. And all of this is creating an opening for Soviet influence. Iran shares a massive border with the Soviet Union. The Tudeh Party, Iran's Communist Party, is gaining visibility. If Iran falls, the entire region could follow. Was Mossadegh communist? No. He had actively suppressed communist groups. He was a nationalist, not a Marxist. But in the Cold War, perception matters more than truth. And the argument works. Eisenhower approves the operation. Codename TPAJAX. The mission is assigned to one man, Kermit Roosevelt Jr., grandson of President Theodore Roosevelt. Young, confident to the point of audacity, he arrives in Tehran in the summer of 1953 with a briefcase full of cash, roughly $1 million, and a plan that sounds simple, but is incredibly risky. 3 main steps. First, bribe key officials, military commanders, politicians, media owners, religious leaders. Second, control the narrative, plant stories in newspapers, spread disinformation, frame Mossadegh as dangerous or secretly aligned with communists. Third, create unrest, hire mobs, organize street violence, make it look like the country is falling apart. And one final move, convince the king to remove Mossadegh by royal decree. Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, on paper, the ruler of Iran, in reality, uncertain, indecisive, haunted by his father's forced removal during World War II. He fears Mossadegh's popularity. He fears failure. He fears losing everything. Roosevelt keeps pushing, meeting him repeatedly, pressuring him, presenting intelligence, some real, some exaggerated. Eventually, the Shah agrees, reluctantly. He signs the decree, but it's already too late. Mossadegh already knows. His intelligence network had intercepted the plot days earlier. Loyal officers had reported unusual meetings and suspicious payments. So when Colonel Nassiri arrives that night with the royal decree, Mossadegh's forces are waiting. Nassiri is arrested. The decree is dismissed. Mossadegh goes on national radio and announces the conspiracy has been thwarted. The Shah panics and flees, first to Baghdad, then to Rome, humiliated, defeated. From the CIA's perspective, it's over. Headquarters sends the order, abort mission. But Roosevelt refuses. He stays in Tehran, ignores direct orders, and decides to try again. This single decision alters the course of history. Roosevelt still has contacts, he still has cash, and he still has relationships with street-level organizers who can mobilize crowds on short notice. So he does something radical. Something that would become a template for decades of covert operations. He starts creating reality. First, he pays groups to pose as Mossadegh supporters. But these groups are instructed to act violently. They smash shop windows, vandalize mosques, tear down religious symbols, shout communist slogans. To ordinary Iranians, it looks like Mossadegh's movement is collapsing into extremism, like the country is descending into anarchy, but it's staged. Every broken window, every inflammatory slogan, orchestrated to trigger one response: fear. At the same time, Roosevelt funds pro-Shah demonstrations. He pays other groups to march calling for the king's return, waving royalist banners, chanting for stability. Now the streets show two forces, chaos and order. Even though both are manipulated by the same hand. Bribed newspapers publish false stories about communist infiltration. Radio broadcasts spread panic, reporting riots that haven't happened and military defections that don't exist. Rumors multiply. Neighbor turns against neighbor. Trust evaporates. People react based on fear and confusion, not facts. And this is the turning point. When reality becomes unclear, people don't wait for truth. They act on instinct, survival, tribal loyalty, religious identity, and once that process begins, it feeds itself. More people join protests, some paid, some genuine, swept up by momentum. The movement grows on its own, uncontrollable. Even Roosevelt later admitted he wasn't sure where the manufactured outrage ended and the real outrage began. The morning begins with tension hanging over Tehran like smoke. Small crowds gather. Shop owners pull down shutters. The city knows something is about to break. At first, small groups, a few dozen, then hundreds, then thousands, pouring in from southern neighborhoods, from the bazaar, from military barracks where officers had quietly switched allegiance, then the entire city, a tidal wave of bodies. No one is directing this anymore. Military units switch sides. Tanks roll out, not to protect the government, but to surround it. Commanders who had been bribed finally act. Entire battalions defect within hours. Gunfire spreads. First isolated bursts, then sustained volleys echoing across districts. The CIA is no longer controlling events. The system is running itself. Mossadegh's residence is attacked. Tanks open fire. Loyalist guards fight back. Gunfights last hours. Smoke rises in thick columns visible across the city. Hundreds are killed. Soldiers, civilians, bystanders on the wrong street at the wrong moment. The government collapses. Cabinet members scatter. Communication lines go dead. The institutions of Iranian democracy crumble in a single afternoon. Mossadegh escapes through a back wall as his house burns. He hides between safe houses, but within days, he surrenders. He's arrested, put on military trial, convicted of treason. He's sentenced to 3 years in prison, followed by house arrest for life. He never holds power again. He dies in 1967, isolated, forbidden from visitors or public statements, erased from official history. The Shah returns from Rome, reclaims control, now backed fully by the United States and Britain. The oil industry is reorganized. A new consortium is formed. British interests return. American companies gain access for the first time. Iranian oil flows again, but profits are shared among foreign corporations. Everyone wins, except Iran. The regime becomes increasingly authoritarian. Political parties are banned, press. Freedom is crushed. The Savak, a secret police force trained with CIA assistance, enforces control through surveillance, imprisonment, and torture. And here's the effect no intelligence agency predicted. When you eliminate every peaceful way to oppose power, you don't eliminate resistance. You transform it. You push it underground, into mosques, into religious schools, into a language of opposition the state cannot suppress without attacking religion itself. Eventually, only one force remains with the moral authority to challenge the regime: religion. 26 years after the coup, the system collapses. The Shah, weakened by cancer, isolated by paranoia, abandoned by the same Western allies who installed him, is overthrown. Millions fill the streets. Not hired mobs this time, real people. Decades of suppressed anger erupting at once. A new government rises, the Islamic Republic, defined by one belief: foreign powers cannot be trusted. The American embassy is stormed. 52 diplomats held hostage for 444 days. Diplomatic relations severed completely. What follows is decades of tension. Sanctions, proxy wars, nuclear standoffs, an entire architecture of Middle Eastern geopolitics shaped by the trauma of 1953. all connected to that single week in August. All of it traces back to one decision, one man in a Tehran safe house who refused to leave when told it was over. The coup lasted 4 days. The consequences still unfolding more than 70 years later. If you think this story was insane, there's another operation that went even further and backfired even harder. I'll see you there.